Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So it's the second hustings of the Labour leadership campaign in the party's traditional heartland of Tyneside. But these are unusual times for Labour. Today, the two wings of the party were in the appeal court, arguing over who should be allowed to vote in the contest. The hearing has been adjourned overnight, but the battle continues for the very heart and soul of the party, with more claims over Trotskyist infiltration. Our political correspondent Michael Crick is at that hustings in Gateshead and joins us now. Michael.
Well, as Jeremy Corbyn arrived here tonight, he was greeted by a crowd of people singing the red flag. And much of what's going on in the Labour Party these days is rather reminiscent of the old days, the 50s and the 80s, when, of course, there were arguments then about whether revolutionary socialists were trying to join the party. And today, Jeremy Corbyn and his deputy, Tom Watson, continued their argument for the third day running about Trotskyist entrism. Familiar scene outside tonight's hustings, people selling Trotskyist papers for revolutionary parties who often stand against Labour, such as the Socialist Workers' Party, or SWP, and the Socialist Party, once called militant.
There's room for everyone's ideas inside the Labour Party.
And you regard yourself as a Trotskyist, do you?
No.
You're a follower of Leon Trotsky?
I'm a socialist, mate.
A Leninist?
Not really.
What do you think of Lenin and Trotsky?
Well, I think they did a good job at the time, yeah.
In the 1980s, I often reported the hard battle by Labour leaders to expel Militant from the party. Militant, I showed, worked as a clandestine Marxist party within Labour, with its own secret meetings, organisation and policy.
It could turn out that even if people are expelled, Militant at the end of the day is stronger than it was in the first place. Michael Crick, ITN, Swansea.
And the young Jeremy Corbyn tried to keep Militant within the Labour Party, declaring himself provisional convener of the Defeat the Witch Hunt campaign.
We'll keep the red flag flying here.
Amid noisy protests outside Labour headquarters and after long legal battles, the Labour High Command finally expelled Militant's leaders from the party. This building is no longer Labour headquarters, though it's still called John Smith House. And when the leaders of Militant came up these steps to meet the National Executive Committee, they were kept beforehand in a room up there, looked after by one of the party's office boys who made them cups of tea. That 19-year-old office boy was Tom Watson. And there are those who'd say that he's now stirring things again. Mr. Watson was in the West Midlands today, having yesterday sent Jeremy Corbyn a wealth of material suggesting the Socialist Party, what was Militant, and another group banned by Labour, the Alliance for Workers' Liberty, once called Socialist Organiser, are trying to join the party again.
There are a small number of members of Trotskyist organisations that have changed their approach and are instructing their members to rejoin the Labour Party and giving them direct instructions to take control of our young Labour groups and our Labour student clubs. There is incontrovertible evidence of this, and I would like to know whether Jeremy thinks that these organisations should be back within the Labour ranks, and I think it's quite important that we get clarity on that.
And Tom Watson cites this speech by the former Militant leader Peter Taff at a recent meeting of the pro-Corbyn group Momentum.
And we said to the left organisations, particularly to Momentum, we want to collaborate with you in a programme to renovate the Labour movement from top to bottom. Yes, we are a separate party, but let us try and organise now a new form of organisation.
Jill Mountford of the Alliance for Workers' Liberty was expelled by Labour earlier this year. Yesterday she tweeted, "Tell Tom Watson we're organising more phone banking for JC this weekend. We'll get an amazing response," she said.
I think it's desperate. I think it's desperate, and if it's not too rude, I think it's pathetic. I'm not an entryist. I'm not infiltrating anything. I'm an honest, open Marxist inside the Labour Party. The Labour Party's always had Marxists in it, and I think it's wonderful. It's a broad church. It should be a broad church of different socialists and different socialist ideas.
Jeremy Corbyn responded to Tom Watson tonight. He backs Labour membership rules agreed by the party conference. Well, in the last half hour, I've asked a spokesman for Jeremy Corbyn whether Mr Corbyn thinks that the current membership rules should be relaxed to allow members of groups like the Socialist Party to come into the Labour Party. His response? Absolutely not.
Michael, thank you very much. We'll hear more from Michael later on. So Jeremy Corbyn is still very much the favourite tonight to be carried back into power on that growing wave of support from those being labelled the Corbynistas. But who are they and what motivates them? Our reporter Kieran Jenkins has been out and about meeting some of the leader's most ardent followers and has this report.
Hello. Hi. Are you the singer?
Yes.
Wow.
The Scouse singing sensation. Yeah.
Lisa Dempster is such an admirer of Jeremy Corbyn. As you'll soon hear, she's written a song for him. We meet at her sister and nephew's house in North Yorkshire.
He makes a lovely cup of tea.
Yeah. So Michael's your host this weekend?
Yeah. And he's a very good host as well.
And it's not long before the conversation gets on to you-know-who.
Yeah. Who would you like to be leader of the Labour Party?
Yeah.
I can see you working on him.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Did you ever imagine you'd fall in love with someone like Jeremy Corbyn?
No, I've never thought I'd have a thing for a politician ever. No.
Why? What is it?
It's not the image, obviously, because as I say, it is like sort of having a crush on your dad. I think it's the charisma, it's the honesty, the integrity.
This is your Jeremy Corbyn song?
Yeah.
Did you sing it to Jeremy Corbyn?
Yes.
And you held his hand?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember that, but my daughter said, yeah, apparently I did. Yeah, I held his hand as I was singing it to him.
So I'm Jeremy Corbyn then?
Yeah.
How do you have it?
Sort of had hold of his hand like that. Jeremy's standing strong, and we know that he will make it. Although you're doing him wrong, so wrong.
Lisa only joined Labour a few weeks ago. Already she has her own video channel singing Jeremy Corbyn's praises. It's a side of Aunt Lisa, nephew Michael and his friend Dean haven't seen before.
Standing strong.
What do you reckon?
Wow, that was good though.
Yeah.
You should go on Britain's Got Talent.
In Hackney, East London, nobody looks like bursting into song.
I wouldn't say everything about his leadership has been great, but I mean, you know, I support him and I think there's more good than bad overall.
All right, welcome to
This is an educational evening organised by Momentum, the mighty activist group that emerged from Corbyn's first leadership campaign. But I'm intrigued by the new members among them, tens of thousands signing up even as Labour turns in on itself.
The Labour Party is crumbling and he's the man in charge of it. And you're all telling me he's competent.
On what grounds do you say the Labour Party is crumbling? I keep hearing on the news that hundreds of thousands of people have joined in the last few months.
One recent recruit is Amy, a 23-year-old teaching assistant.
What's drawn you to Jeremy Corbyn?
Basically, just feeling like he is representing my politics in a mainstream political party. And that's essentially just the fact that he's anti-austerity, anti-racism, anti-sexism.
What about this idea the deputy leader of the Labour Party has come out with, that there are old hands, maybe some of them here, Trotskyites, Bolsheviks, twisting your arm?
I think it's very patronising to me. I'm a young person. I make decisions autonomously.
In fact, Corbynistas have been called all sorts of things.
There's a lot of things that are said about Jeremy Corbyn supporters that just aren't really true. There's a perception that, for example, they're very London, and they're not. They're more likely to be female. They're not really. It's pretty much the same as Labour Party members on average. They're a bunch of trots, and people didn't even vote Labour before. That's not true either.
Would you say middle class?
No, working class.
Northern?
Yes.
Right. Sharon from York ticks a lot of the pollsters' boxes.
I do think he's a good leader, yes.
You think he could be Prime Minister?
I do, yes. I've read through the 10 pledges that he's put forward, and I think the idea of housing for all...
Are these
policies, though, or are they pipe dreams?
I think we have money to spend on things like, you know, wars, tax cuts for the rich. So why is there not money to help people to have what is a very basic requirement?
What is it that you think that he can do for you?
For me, I consider myself a normal person, whatever the word normal is. I'm not rich, I work with children with disabilities and I've done that for 25 years because I love it. I'm seeing the cuts and the cuts and the cuts.
Fellow Corbynistas, when they insist he's just not good enough.
Whatever has stirred in people like Lisa, his opponents would say the rest of the country aren't feeling it. The Corbynistas, though, they're voting for him anyway.
Just keep going. Well, joining me now is the General Secretary of the Socialist Party, Peter Taff, who you saw in Michael Crick's report earlier. Mr Taff was a founder member of the far-left group Militant and among those expelled from Labour in the 1980s. Now he wants to be allowed back in. Neil Coleman was once Jeremy Corbyn's head of policy, but he quit and is now chief advisor to the leadership challenger Owen Smith. And in a moment, I'll be speaking to a Jeremy Corbyn supporter and newly elected member of Labour's National Executive Committee, Claudia Webb. Peter Taff, let's start with you. You want to get back into Labour. What makes you think that Jeremy Corbyn's Labour wants you back in?
Well, the Labour Party has changed and is changing every day. It's now probably the biggest party on the left in Western Europe. It's a radical party. It's not the same as the Labour Party in the past when they expelled people for their ideas. I was expelled from the Labour Party for standing up for the working people of Liverpool. We defeated Thatcher. We built more houses in Liverpool than all the councils put together.
OK, and you think that Jeremy Corbyn wants someone back who calls for violent revolution to restore workers' democracy?
Well, that's not true.
Well, it is true. A document I've just read, an article in your name, calls for a new revolution to restore workers' democracy, to complete the work begun in the 1917 Russian Revolution.
Yes, but Cathy, you used the term violent revolution.
Well, the Russian Revolution wasn't exactly peaceful.
Well,
people died and it triggered a civil war.
It's not a point of going into history here.
Well, when you went into history,
when I talk about revolution, I talk about a movement of mass movement of working people to take power and to take the resources of society into their hands. Bernie Sanders in the US spoke about the need for a political revolution. In my opinion, the movement around Jeremy represents that in Britain. An attempt to mobilise to take power away from the ruling class.
Would you describe yourself as a trot?
Well, a trot is used today as a term of abuse to stop people from thinking about the ideas.
Would you proudly
that we put
describe
forward.
yourself
I
as
would
a
say
Trotskyist?
I adhere to many of the ideas and the methods of Leon Trotsky. But we don't live in the past. We don't live in Russia. We live in Britain. We stand for a policy that addresses the issues of ordinary working people today.
Right. Neil Coleman, why shouldn't Mr Taff and people like him be allowed back into Labour? He mobilised against Margaret Thatcher and the poll tax. You know, the Fabians and the Cooperative group are affiliated groups within Labour. Why not more of the leftist, Trotskyist groups?
Well, I think before Peter can get back into Labour, he's at least going to have to explain whether he's going to dissolve the separate party that he's currently the General Secretary of, a party which is publicly calling for a split in Labour, which suggests he isn't terribly well disposed towards us.
Would you be happy with affiliate status?
Yes, we would. You've made a very good point. The same as the Co-op Party is affiliated to Labour. We would like to be part of this new, exciting project.
Neil Coleman, if you could answer that point.
Well, I think the point is, I mean, to be honest, I don't really think the big issue facing Labour at the moment is whether Peter and a few of his fellow Trotskyists are readmitted to the party or not. I mean, as you've said, Peter, unlike me, doesn't believe in a parliamentary road to socialism.
That's not true.
He believes in building a Bolshevik-type party that will take power through a revolution.
OK, do you support taking power through the parliamentary...
Of course. We stand for the election of a socialist Labour government that would introduce measures in Parliament to take hold of the 100 monopolies that control 85% of the economy. Let me just point out, when we were in the Labour Party, 3 MPs supported the position of Militant. Terry Fields, Dave Ellis, who's active today, and Pat Wall. Why, if that was the case, would this red herring that Neil has dragged in to try and cloud the debate
Well,
over Jeremy Corbyn.
let me go back to you, Neil. What are the consequences of all of this? I mean, you've spoken about an electoral defeat as heavy as 1931. You were Mr. Corbyn's head of policy. Why is he failing in your view?
Well, I think the problems that we face is that at the moment, the party does look to most people in the country to be weak, divided and chaotic. And I'm afraid a lot of that is down to Jeremy's leadership. And parties that look weak, divided and chaotic lose elections. They lose them badly. And we probably face an election next year. The Tories are not going to miss an opportunity like that. We're not putting up an effective opposition to them. And if we lose heavily in that election, that will be a disaster. It will be a disaster for Labour. It will be a disaster for the left in Labour, as people like Owen Jones have pointed out. But most of all, it will be a disaster for working people in this country who need a Labour government.
OK. Well, let me turn now to Claudia Webb. You didn't want to discuss with these two gentlemen here, which kind of speaks volumes about the state of the Labour Party at the moment, but glad to have you on now. Could you answer that point about the fact that a Jeremy Corbyn victory in this leadership election would spell disaster for working people because you wouldn't win at the next election? You've got zero chance.
Well, look, Jeremy is really delivering change, and he's really standing on a platform of anti-austerity. He's basically saying and offering hope for a new generation, really. We're talking about a future which is not based on inequality, but a future that is based on tackling those inequalities, ensuring that we end the divide between those that have the most, which are the limited few, and providing for the many. And Jeremy's delivering that hope and that change.
OK, but there's no future, there's no change unless you win power. And all of the polls suggest that although he may be very popular within a wing of the public who support the Labour Party, he's not going to win a general election.
Well, this is not about, in a sense, popularity within a wing. We're talking about a transformation of the Labour Party, where we've seen a doubling up, more than doubling up of the membership. We're now at 250,000 or more in terms of our membership.
And some of those members are Trotskyists, like Mr. Taff here. Would you let him back in? You have the power to decide that. You're joining
the Labour Party from all walks of life.
OK, so should Mr. Taff get back in?
Well, look, people are joining Labour from all walks of life. Mums, dads, doctors, lawyers, people from
Trotskyists, should they be let back in? Yes or no?
Cities up and down this country, north and south.
Should Trotskyists like Mr. Taff be let back in?
I think there's a difficulty with...
You're not answering the question.
I think there is a difficulty with narrowing down the debate with the notion of entryism.
But should he be let back in? You can't answer that question.
You're talking about entryism. It's a small proportion, let's face it, it's a small proportion of the real membership of the Labour Party. What we're really talking about is the vast majority of people that are joining the change. They want to take the fight to the Tory government to end austerity, to ensure that we are catering for the many and not for the few. And that's really about the change that we want to see. And Jeremy's delivering that change. He's delivering hope and he's delivering that change.
You have made that point. Claudia Webb, Peter Taff, Neil Coleman, thank you very much for joining me. Jack.
Well, let's go back now to Gateshead, where the second Labour leadership hustings is taking place this evening. We're joined again by our political correspondent, Michael Crick. Michael Crick, what's been said so far?
Well, Jackie, actually the most amusing moment came just a few minutes ago when all of a sudden, just as they were about to move on to the question of energy policy, the lights went out, the whole room was dark, and both candidates were left sort of trying to exchange jokes with each other.
To promote all this, but if our message to the rest of the world is that the lights have gone out...
plunged into darkness.
When it came to the actual serious debate, I think the most interesting exchanges of the evening, showing real differences between the two men, were over Europe.
Look, a referendum has taken place, and I think we have to recognise that whatever we feel about it, there is a result from that referendum, which we have to work with. Sophie.
Right, let's move on.
Jeremy, what that shows... What that answer reveals, I think, is the truth. Let me finish. What that reveals, I think, is the truth that you were never really bought into the idea of the European Union. That's what it says to me. And what I hear from you is that
other countries are contemplating a more protectionist, introverted, introspective future for themselves, and therefore we've got to work with that.
France?
Well, France wants to be part of the European Union, unless you're supporting Marine Le Pen and those people who want to leave, which I know you're not.
Absolutely.
So I'm absolutely certain we should be in, and I'm worried that what this reveals is you've never really liked the idea of the European Union.
Are you becoming a mind reader?
Well, I don't need to be. I don't need to be. You told us for 30 years you weren't keen on it.
No,
it was only in the referendum you seemed to come and to go a Damascene conversion.
You and I stood on platforms together and argued the case for human rights, environmental rights, consumer protection, environmental protection, market access for British industry in Europe. And we agreed on that.
The debate at the Labour hustings there.
I've been getting away with